Bruce Lee was teaching inside a quiet training hall when the interruption happened, a place where discipline mattered more than display and learning mattered more than applause. His students stood focused as he explained how real power comes from balance, timing, and restraint rather than brute force. The wooden floor carried the marks of years of practice, and the silence in the room reflected complete attention, the kind that exists only when everyone is fully present. Bruce moved calmly, correcting posture with the lightest touch, showing that strength does not need excess effort to exist, until the sound of heavy footsteps broke that silence and changed the atmosphere instantly. That calm was broken the moment the door opened and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the training hall. Footsteps that carried weight, certainty, and the confidence of someone used to being noticed the instant he enters a room. A large man stepped inside, easily weighing around 250 pounds, his body shaped by years of lifting iron, pushing heavy bars, and measuring progress in numbers rather than movement. His chest was wide and solid, his arms thick and veined, his neck stiff with muscle built through repetition and strain, not flexibility or flow. He did not look around with curiosity or respect, but with judgment, scanning the room as if he were already ranking everyone inside it. There was a slight smile on his face, not friendly, but knowing, the kind of smile that comes from believing you have already figured things out before listening to a single word. His confidence was loud even before he spoke, filling the space and disrupting the quiet focus that had existed moments earlier. When his eyes finally landed on Bruce Lee, his expression shifted into quiet amusement, and he let out a short laugh, just loud enough for nearby students to hear, as if to invite them into his disbelief. In his mind, this small, calm man standing at the front did not match the image of strength he respected. He looked at Bruce again, slowly, almost dismissively, and questioned whether this could really be the famous Bruce Lee people talked about, the man whose name carried so much weight despite his size. To him, strength had a certain look, a certain mass, and what he saw in front of him did not fit the definition he had built his identity around. The room tensed instantly as his words settled into the air, not because anyone believed him, but because everyone felt the shift in energy that comes when ego enters a disciplined space. Several students straightened their posture without realizing it. Others glanced at Bruce, waiting to see how he would respond, expecting irritation, defense, or at least correction. But Bruce Lee did none of that. He did not tighten his jaw, raise his voice, or project authority through force. Instead, he turned calmly toward the man and acknowledged him with a simple nod, the kind of gesture that showed presence without submission and confidence without aggression. He asked what had brought him there, not as a challenge, but as a genuine question, giving the man space to reveal his intentions fully. The bodybuilder answered without hesitation, making it clear that he had come to see real strength and that what he saw in front of him did not impress him. He spoke openly and confidently about size, muscle, and measurable power, explaining that in his world, strength was something concrete, something you could load onto a barbell, lift off the ground, and prove in numbers. To him, power was visible, undeniable, and heavy, and respect was earned through physical dominance that everyone could see and measure. He talked as if these ideas were facts, not opinions, and as if anyone who believed otherwise simply did not understand how the real world worked. Bruce listened to every word without interrupting, without correcting, and without attempting to defend himself. He did not list achievements, mention experience, or remind anyone who he was. He stood quietly, absorbing the man's perspective with complete attention, not because he agreed, but because he understood that true confidence does not rush to speak. In that moment, Bruce showed something more powerful than argument or explanation. He showed restraint. While the bodybuilder spoke from certainty built on numbers and appearances, Bruce remained still, grounded and patient, allowing the contrast between noise and calm to become visible to everyone in the room without saying a single unnecessary word. Bruce then took a small step forward, not sudden and not aggressive, but deliberate, as if he were stepping into the exact distance where truth could no longer hide behind words. He looked directly at the man, his expression calm and unreadable, and asked a single simple question about whether he truly believed that size alone decided who would win a fight. There was no sarcasm in his voice and no attempt to corner him verbally, only curiosity that invited the man to commit fully to what he believed. The bodybuilder answered immediately and confidently, saying that size always decided it, that mass, strength and muscle would overwhelm anything else every time. To him, this was not arrogance but certainty, a belief reinforced by years of dominating spaces through physical presence alone. Bruce paused for a brief moment after hearing the answer, not because he was unsure, but because he understood the weight of the belief that had just been spoken. Then, without raising his voice or changing his tone, he invited the man to try to touch him just once. He did not frame it as a fight, did not threaten or challenge, and did not promise to prove anything. He simply offered an opportunity to test belief against reality. The request sounded almost casual, yet the effect on the room was immediate. Conversations stopped completely, breathing slowed, and every person present felt the seriousness of what was about to happen. This was no longer a debate about strength. It was a moment where theory would meet experience. The bodybuilder hesitated only briefly before agreeing, fully aware of the eyes now fixed on him. Backing down would mean doubt, and doubt had no place in the identity he had built around dominance. He squared his shoulders, adjusted his stance, and prepared himself with the confidence of someone who had never questioned his advantage. In his mind, this would be quick and decisive, a demonstration that would confirm everything he already believed. Bruce, meanwhile, stood relaxed, his hands down, his posture natural, his body free of unnecessary tension. He did not assume a fighting stance or display readiness in a way that looked impressive. Instead, he waited, centered and composed, allowing the contrast between effort and ease to speak louder than any explanation ever could. When the punch finally came, it carried more than just physical force. It carried belief, identity, and years of unquestioned confidence. The bodybuilder committed fully, driving his weight forward, his shoulder turning, his arm extending with the kind of power built from heavy presses, brutal repetitions, and a lifetime of relying on mass to dominate space. In his mind, this was not a risky move at all. This was familiarity. This was his world. He had thrown his weight around countless times before, had watched people flinch, retreat, or freeze under the pressure of sheer size. To him, this moment was already decided before it began. Bruce Lee did not brace himself. He did not tense his muscles or retreat backward. He did not try to match force with force, because that was never the point. At the precise moment, the punch crossed the invisible threshold between intention and action. Bruce shifted. The movement was subtle, almost unnoticeable to the untrained eye. A slight change of angle measured in inches rather than feet. He stepped forward and inward, not away, closing distance instead of creating it, entering the space where raw power loses structure and speed becomes irrelevant. The punch passed through empty air, slicing past where Bruce's head had been a fraction of a second earlier, carrying all its force into nothing. In that same instant, Bruce's hand moved, not clenched into a fist and not swung with violence, but open, relaxed, and precise. His palm connected lightly with the man's chest, just above the solar plexus, a placement that looked almost gentle to observers who did not understand what they were witnessing. There was no dramatic sound, no visible shockwave, no cinematic impact that screamed damage. Yet the effect was immediate and overwhelming. The bodybuilder's breath exploded out of his lungs all at once, as if his body had forgotten how to function properly. His diaphragm seized, his chest locked, and the air he depended on vanished without warning. Confusion struck before pain ever could. His hands dropped instinctively to his stomach, his eyes widened, and his mouth opened as he tried desperately to inhale, only to find that nothing came in. Panic followed instantly, not the controlled fear of competition, but the raw, animal panic that arises when the body realizes it cannot breathe. His knees bent under his own weight, not because he had been knocked down, but because his system no longer knew how to support itself. The strength he had trusted for years betrayed him in seconds, not through injury, but through irrelevance. Around them, the room froze. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the smallest sounds seemed to disappear as everyone present tried to process what had just happened. This was not a knockout. This was not domination through brutality. This was something far more unsettling. A man who moments ago embodied physical superiority now struggled simply to stand, while the smaller man in front of him remained calm, balanced, and completely unaffected. Bruce stepped back slightly, giving the man space, his expression unchanged, his breathing steady, as if nothing unusual had occurred. Time stretched as the bodybuilder's nervous system fought to reset itself. After several long seconds, his diaphragm released, air rushed back in painfully, and he gasped loudly, drawing breath like someone resurfacing after being underwater. His face flushed, his chest heaved, and embarrassment mixed with disbelief as he straightened slowly, still unsure of what exactly had happened to him. There was no anger in Bruce's posture, and no triumph in his eyes. He had not attacked to win. He had demonstrated to teach. The 8 seconds that followed the challenge dismantled a belief that had taken years to build. The bodybuilder realized, in a way words never could have explained, that strength without understanding is fragile, that size without control is vulnerable, and that power measured only in weight and muscle does not translate automatically into effectiveness. Bruce had not overpowered him. He had bypassed him. He had not resisted force. He had redirected it. He had not relied on effort. He had relied on timing, structure, and knowledge of how the human body actually works under pressure. In that moment, the man understood something deeply unsettling and deeply important. Everything he trusted most had failed him, not because it was useless, but because it was incomplete. His strength was real, but it was narrow. Bruce's strength was quiet, adaptable, and devastatingly efficient. The difference was not talent or genetics, but understanding. As the room slowly returned to motion and breath, one truth remained unmistakable to everyone watching. What they had just witnessed was not a fight, but a lesson, and that lesson required no explanation because experience had already done the teaching. 8 seconds after the challenge had begun, the lesson was already complete, yet its weight continued to settle heavily over the room, as if time itself had slowed to allow everyone present to fully absorb what they had witnessed. The bodybuilder remained bent forward for a moment, hands resting on his knees, breathing uneven, his body trying to re-establish a rhythm it had lost without warning. This was not the posture of a man who had been defeated through force, but of someone whose certainty had been abruptly dismantled. Around him, students stood frozen, not out of fear, but out of confusion and awe, because what they had just seen did not align with the rules of strength they had grown up believing in. Bruce Lee did not rush the moment. He did not step forward to explain, justify, or capitalize on what had happened. He waited patiently, allowing the man's nervous system to settle and his breathing to return naturally. This patience itself was part of the lesson, showing that true control includes knowing when not to act. When the bodybuilder finally straightened, still pale and shaken, Bruce asked calmly if he was all right, his voice carrying no trace of mockery or dominance. It was a genuine question, asked with the same tone he used when correcting a student's stance or offering guidance during practice. The absence of humiliation confused the man even more than the physical experience had. He had expected laughter, judgment, or at least a display of superiority. Instead, he was met with calm concern and quiet respect. Bruce then turned back toward his students, not to celebrate, but to continue teaching, as if the interruption had been nothing more than another example placed in the flow of learning. He spoke about strength without raising his voice, explaining that power is not defined by how much weight the body can carry, but by how efficiently it can respond under pressure. He reminded them that control, timing, and understanding of movement determine outcomes far more reliably than raw force ever could. As Bruce spoke, the meaning of what had just occurred began to settle more deeply into the room. This had not been a contest or a public correction. It had been a demonstration of principle. The bodybuilder, now standing quietly to the side, listened more intently than anyone else. His confidence had not been crushed, but it had been reshaped, forced to confront a reality he had never needed to face before. For years, his size had protected him from doubt. People rarely challenged him, and when they did, his mass alone usually ended the conversation. But in those 8 seconds, he learned that size without adaptability becomes predictable, and predictability is weakness in any real confrontation. Bruce continued explaining that strength without control is decoration, impressive to look at but unreliable when circumstances change. He spoke about how tension slows the body, how excess muscle engagement drains energy, and how reacting emotionally blinds judgment. Every word landed differently now, because the students had just seen those principles applied in real time. The lesson was no longer theoretical, it was embodied. The contrast between effort and ease, between noise and calm, had become undeniable. The bodybuilder felt something unfamiliar rising within him, not anger or resentment, but curiosity mixed with humility. He realized that the thing he had always trusted most had limits he had never explored. His strength was real, but it was narrow, confined to environments where rules favored mass and preparation time. Bruce's strength, by contrast, was adaptable, responsive, and rooted in understanding rather than display. This realization was uncomfortable because it required letting go of certainty, but it was also freeing because it revealed a path forward rather than a dead end. As the class resumed its rhythm, the bodybuilder remained standing near the edge of the room, no longer an intruder, but not yet a student, caught in the space between what he had been and what he might become. He watched Bruce teach with new eyes, noticing the efficiency of his movements, the way he conserved energy, the way he observed rather than reacted. He saw now that nothing Bruce did was accidental, and that what looked effortless was the result of deep discipline and long refinement. By the time the session ended, the atmosphere in the room had changed permanently. The students did not leave talking loudly or replaying the moment with excitement. They left quietly, thoughtful, carrying the lesson inward rather than outward. The bodybuilder lingered, still processing, understanding that what had happened was not meant to embarrass him, but to reveal something he did not know he was missing. In those 8 seconds, a belief built over years had cracked, and through that crack, the possibility of real growth had finally entered. The bodybuilder did not leave immediately after the class ended, even though his instincts told him to retreat back into the comfort of the world he understood, the world where size spoke for him and strength required no explanation. Instead, he stood quietly near the edge of the room, watching as students bowed respectfully and gathered their belongings, his mind replaying the last few moments again and again. The sensation of losing his breath still lingered in his chest, not as pain, but as a reminder that something fundamental had shifted. For the first time in years, he felt uncertain, not about his strength, but about his understanding of it. He had always believed that power was something you accumulated, something you built layer by layer through effort and strain. But what he had experienced required no build-up at all, only precision and timing. When most of the students had left, he finally stepped forward, his posture noticeably different from when he had first entered. His shoulders were still broad, his presence still imposing, but the arrogance that had accompanied him earlier was gone. He looked at Bruce Lee with a mixture of hesitation and sincerity and asked a simple question, not loudly and not with confidence, but honestly. He asked whether what had just happened was something that could be learned, or whether it was something Bruce had simply been born with. Bruce listened carefully before answering, then explained that nothing he had done was mysterious or magical, and that understanding movement, balance, and timing was available to anyone willing to study deeply and let go of their ego. That answer stayed with the bodybuilder long after he left the training hall. On his way back to the gym he normally trained in, surrounded by mirrors and metal and familiar routines, he felt disconnected from the environment that had once defined him. The clanging of plates and the competitive glances no longer felt empowering. Instead, they felt limited. He realized that for years he had been strengthening his body while leaving his awareness underdeveloped, and that imbalance had gone unnoticed because no one had ever exposed it. That night, he struggled to sleep, not because of soreness, but because his mind kept returning to the same realization. Being strong had protected him from learning. In the days that followed, he found himself questioning things he had never questioned before. He noticed how stiff his movements were when he walked, how much tension he carried even when standing still, and how quickly he relied on brute effort rather than efficiency. He remembered Bruce's calm, the absence of wasted motion, and the way control had replaced force so effortlessly. Slowly, the idea formed that perhaps his strength had become a kind of armor, impressive on the outside, but restrictive within. The more he thought about it, the clearer it became that his confidence had been built on familiarity, not adaptability, and that real power demanded both. A week later, he made a decision that surprised even himself. He went to the address Bruce had given him and stepped into a space completely different from the gyms he knew. There were no mirrors lining the walls, no heavy machines, no sense of competition. The atmosphere was quieter, more focused, and oddly more demanding. When Bruce saw him enter, he did not mention the challenge or the interruption. He simply acknowledged him and welcomed him like any other student. That simple act carried more weight than any humiliation could have, because it made it clear that learning required humility, not punishment. Training under Bruce was uncomfortable in ways lifting never had been. Movements that looked simple revealed flaws the bodybuilder had never noticed. His balance was poor, his reactions slow, and his tendency to rely on tension worked against him at every turn. Each correction forced him to confront habits built over years, habits that had served him well in one context but failed completely in another. There was no shortcut, no way to overpower the process. Progress required patience, awareness, and the willingness to be a beginner again. Over time, something began to change. His body remained large and powerful, but it moved differently. He learned how to relax without becoming weak, how to generate force without telegraphing it, and how to conserve energy instead of burning it unnecessarily. The strength he already possessed did not disappear. It became refined. Combined with understanding, his size transformed from a blunt instrument into a precise tool. He began to realize that the lesson Bruce had given him in those 8 seconds was not about defeat, but about direction. It had pointed him toward a deeper version of strength, one that did not rely on intimidation or assumption, but on awareness and control. Looking back, he understood that the most important thing Bruce had shown him was not a technique, but a mindset. The willingness to listen before acting, to observe before reacting, and to remain calm even when challenged. That single moment had not taken anything away from him. It had given him something far more valuable. It had given him the courage to admit that he did not know everything, and in doing so, it opened the door to growth he had never imagined possible. As the years passed, That moment continued to echo through the bodybuilder's life in ways he never could have predicted at the time. What began as a challenge fueled by certainty and ego slowly revealed itself as a turning point, not because it shattered him, but because it redirected him. He carried the lesson with him quietly, rarely speaking about it unless someone asked, and even then, he did not dramatize it. He understood now that the true power of the experience was not in how quickly it happened, but in how deeply it reshaped his understanding of strength, humility, and growth. 8 seconds had been enough to expose the limits of his beliefs, but a lifetime was required to fully absorb what those seconds meant. He returned to his world of training, competition, and discipline, but he was no longer the same man who relied solely on size to define himself. Where he once sought validation through numbers and visible dominance, he now valued efficiency, awareness, and adaptability. He noticed how many people, just like his former self, confused appearance with ability and volume with effectiveness. Instead of dismissing them, he recognized himself in them. He saw how easy it is to mistake familiarity for truth, and how rarely people are willing to question the foundations of their confidence. When younger lifters laughed at smaller men or underestimated those who moved quietly, he remembered the calm in Bruce Lee's eyes, and the way that calm had dismantled certainty without hostility. Bruce Lee, for his part, never spoke of the incident as a victory. To him, it was simply another moment where a principle revealed itself naturally. He believed that life constantly offers lessons, but most people are too busy defending their identity to receive them. He taught that real mastery begins when a person becomes willing to be wrong, willing to listen, and willing to let go of the need to dominate every interaction. Strength, in his view, was not about overpowering others, but about understanding oneself deeply enough that reaction was no longer automatic and fear no longer dictated behavior. The ripple of that single moment extended beyond the individuals directly involved. Those who witnessed it carried the lesson into their own lives, sometimes consciously, sometimes without realizing it. Some applied it to training, others to work, relationships, or conflict. They learned that silence can be stronger than argument, that restraint can be more effective than aggression, and that the loudest presence in the room often masks the deepest insecurity. They saw that when someone is truly grounded, they do not rush to prove anything, because their actions already speak with clarity. In time, the bodybuilder came to understand that being proven wrong was not a loss, but a gift. It stripped away illusion and replaced it with opportunity. The humility he learned that day did not weaken him, it expanded him. It allowed him to grow beyond the narrow definition of strength he had inherited, and to develop a more complete understanding of what it means to be capable in an unpredictable world. He learned that adaptability is the highest form of power, because life does not follow rules the way weights do, and people do not cooperate the way machines do. This is why that moment matters long after the 8 seconds have passed. It reminds us that the greatest lessons rarely arrive with noise or spectacle. They arrive quietly, often disguised as discomfort, challenging us to question what we think we know. Bruce Lee did not teach through humiliation or force. He taught through clarity. He showed that true strength is calm under pressure, precise under chaos, and humble in victory. In the end, the lesson was never about who could fight or who was stronger. It was about perception, about the danger of assuming that what you can see is all that exists, about the courage required to admit that there is more to learn. 8 seconds were enough to change a belief, but the impact of that change extended across years, shaping actions, choices, and understanding in ways no punch ever could. And that is the quiet power Bruce Lee left behind. The reminder that mastery is not something you display for others, but something you carry within yourself, ready to reveal itself only when it truly matters. In the end, what happened in that room was never truly about a challenge or a demonstration of physical ability. It was about a meeting between two very different understandings of strength, one loud and visible, the other quiet and deeply rooted in awareness. Bruce Lee did not set out to defeat anyone, and he did not seek to elevate himself in the eyes of those watching. He simply allowed truth to reveal itself through experience, knowing that real learning cannot be forced through explanation alone. What unfolded in those 8 seconds was not a victory of one man over another, but the collapse of an illusion that had gone unexamined for years. The bodybuilder walked in believing that power was something you could measure, display, and use to dominate space, and he walked out understanding that such power, while real, is incomplete without control, timing, and adaptability. The students who witnessed the moment did not cheer or celebrate, because they sensed instinctively that what they had seen was deeper than entertainment. They had watched a belief dissolve, not through humiliation, but through clarity. Bruce Lee showed that the highest form of strength is the ability to remain calm when challenged, precise when pressure rises, and humble even when proven right. This lesson reaches far beyond martial arts or physical training. In life, we often rely on what has worked for us in the past and mistake familiarity for truth. We defend our assumptions, protect our identity, and resist moments that threaten our sense of certainty. Yet growth begins exactly where certainty ends. Bruce Lee's quiet response reminds us that when we stop trying to prove ourselves and start observing more deeply, we open the door to real mastery. True power is not loud, it does not rush, and it does not need validation. It waits, prepared and grounded, ready to act only when action truly matters.